Welcome once again to the Resiliency Project. This is a series of interviews and stories about resilience and reinvention. We learn lessons helpful in these very difficult COVID-19 days. I'm Teddy Katz. I used to be a sports journalist at CBC, and to help me and hopefully you in these difficult times, I decided to create the Resiliency Project. This is a series of talks with people who have lived through resilience and reinvention in their lives and who can share some of the biggest lessons for us all. Helping me out with all of this is my good friend and communications professional extraordinaire, PJ Kwong. PJ, welcome.
Teddy, thank you so much. I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Tell me why you think these stories, what you're trying to do with the Resiliency Project, why it's so important.
I think these stories are just so important, especially nowadays, because they're human stories. They're people who have been through a lot of adversity in their life, and it's stories that all of us can relate to, especially with everything that's going on in our lives now. And you hear so much bad news about the pandemic. These stories give us hope, and they actually give us ways that we can look ahead to the future and try and regain control in these very, very difficult moments.
You said that magic word that I just love. It's a 4-letter word, though.
Yeah.
That word I just love. I mean, I'm sitting here with my 93-year-old mother-in-law. We are just having the best time sort of as a family. I see this as a hopeful time and really as a world reset. What about you?
I do too. I see that, they always say, and it's a bit of a cliche, that out of crisis comes opportunity, and that it is true to a large degree. Although when you're in the crisis, it's very, very hard to see it, and that's why these stories are so important, like the one we're going to tell you today.
So tell me about the one you're going to tell me about today.
Well, for today's episode, we're delighted to be able to be joined by Kevin Rempel. Now, Kevin, in 2013, he was part of Team Canada and helped Team Canada win the World Championship in sledge hockey. And then the following year after that, in 2014, Kevin helped Team Canada, once again to a bronze medal at the Paralympics in Sochi.
On the blue line for the Czech Republic, there is Kevin Rempel. 6 assists so far in the Paralympic Winter Games in Sochi.
Now, Kevin has dealt with a fair bit of adversity, as I said, in his life to get to Sochi. As a kid, he dreamed of competing at the X Games, but he broke his back, pelvis, and his ribs and was paralyzed in a motocross accident when he was 23. A jump he was attempting in front of a crowd went horribly wrong. Kevin had to deal with having a physical disability, but as we'll hear, he also had some mental health challenges that came with it. And with mental health, PJ, something that's very topical right now with COVID-19, we thought that Kevin would make a great guest today. Kevin, welcome to the Resiliency Project.
What's going on, Teddy? Thanks for having me on. What's up, PJ?
It's so great to have you, Kevin. Kevin, when you look at this pandemic with the feeling, that a lot of us have, that the world is kind of spinning out of control right now for all of us, how much does it remind you of what you went through after your accident?
The parallels are very close. When I think about, I've been delivering keynote presentations virtually here, and the conversations parallel in the sense that when I was injured, as an example, like immediately my life shifted overnight. I lost my job. I lost my identity. I was living through uncertainty, and it took an indefinite period of time to find my new normal. And so from that, it was as if I'm living through it just in different ways when COVID happened. And what I knew, and as I'm sure we're going to get into, when it comes to resiliency, or just resilience for that matter, we know that if you've gone through something on a similar level that is as difficult or even more, it makes the next challenges you go through that much easier. And so when the current situation that we're in today happened, it didn't scare me in the sense that I knew that I had what it took, not just resourcefully, but especially mentally. I knew that above all else, as long as my mindset was in the right place and I could keep it, maintain it, develop it through those challenges, that everything would continue to be okay.
We're going to get into a lot of that, but how much, when suddenly the world changed a couple months ago, did it bring back difficult memories for you? You say that because you had been through what you had been through when you were in your mid-20s, that it wasn't necessarily as hard as what you went through then. But was it difficult to sort of feel like you were in that kind of position again?
No, actually the opposite. Swear to God, it like fired me up, because as soon as COVID happened, like I was like, I got this. Not to say that I haven't had challenges throughout. The last 8 weeks have not been a cakewalk by any means. But no, when it happened, I lit up, honestly, because I know that I have what it takes. And for anyone who is challenged today, even if you haven't yet gone through something that's considerably as difficult maybe as what we're facing today, know that the challenges you're faced today are going to just strengthen you and prepare you for something greater in the future.
So interesting. We're going to get to that, but I wonder if we could start by stepping.
I can't help the motivation stuff sometimes. It's just like.
Can I say one thing?
You have your hand up.
10 weeks, not 8, Kevin. 10 weeks. There, I've said it.
It feels like a lifetime, doesn't it?
I know.
Kevin, take us back, will you, for those who don't know your story. Take us back to the road to recovery, because that might actually help people understand how to deal with some of the things that perhaps they're struggling with right now. Tell us a little bit about, what that road to recovery was like for you, how long it took, and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
The short story, as you mentioned, when I was 23 years old pursuing freestyle motocross, my second show I was at, I ended up crashing, broke my back, pelvis, and ribs, and was paralyzed. And when I was in the hospital, first I was told I was likely never going to walk again. And my mindset at that time was, I respect your opinion, doctors, but you don't know me and you haven't even given me a chance yet. And I need to continue to try as long as I can until I feel like there's nothing else left to give. And if at that point I'm not where I want to be, then that's where I will be. But I'm not going to accept someone's opinion of me and my reality today when I haven't even taken a shot yet. So I think that's important to kind of just set up the stage about like how I was mentally when I first was injured and when I got the news that I was never supposed to walk. Just for some timestamps, it was about 6 weeks until I wiggled my first toe. I spent 4 months in rehab before I'd ever came home. 10 months in a wheelchair, 2 months on canes. I was walking and riding in a year, but it was 3 to 4 years for me to get around moving like I can today. And a presentation I just did earlier today, I shared a story about setbacks where after I had just gotten out of the wheelchair, the 12-month mark, I'm walking without any assistive devices at all. And I was getting Botox injections in my legs to help with the muscle spasms. And the first treatment went really well, but the second treatment, we doubled the dosage thinking it was going to make a big difference. And it ended up wiping out my legs completely. And at around the 18-month mark, I had to go back into the wheelchair. I needed to wait 3 months for the Botox to wear off. And it took me about another 3 months to regain the muscle that I had previously built. So, to go from like paralyzed to walking, and then at the 18-month mark, back in the wheelchair again was just mentally devastating. But that's the journey. Like the journey is not linear. It's going to take time. And as I'm sure, again, we're going to get into, and you alluded to in the introduction, is that we just can't necessarily see what's on the other side yet. And when I was injured, I had no idea about Paralympic sport or anything else. And I'll let you kind of lead into it, but that's the journey. It takes time for us to understand those steps and go through those steps.
At the same time, you're on this road to recovery. You were also dealing with some issues with your father. I wonder if you could sort of take the audience through that as well. What happened there?
My dad, unfortunately, long story short, we were deer hunting 4 years before my accident, building a tree stand, when a branch broke and my dad fell 2 stories to the ground, breaking his back, and became a complete paraplegic. So my mom had both husband and son in chairs at the exact same time. the difference between my dad and myself was he was a complete paraplegic, meaning he basically severed his spinal cord, and I was an incomplete. So my fracture and dislocation was realigned through surgery. That gave me the chance to get better with a little bit of luck and a lot of hard work. My dad dealt with, as you can imagine, depression. He was only a few years from retirement, but his attitude, his mindset about how he viewed his challenges and a gambling addiction which took over, led to my mom leaving my dad. And after 5 years from his accident and 7 weeks after my mom left, my dad ended up taking his own life.
How difficult was that for you?
So at the time that it happened, there was so many, like my life, I was only about 13, 14 months post my injury when my dad passed away. So my life was still kind of just a blur, and that just added to it. It wasn't until a year later when I felt like doing the same. And to date, I've never hurt myself. I've never attempted anything, but I was mentally in the worst place I felt I could ever be. And what I knew in that moment was, when I thought about doing what my dad did, is that I don't want that to be the ending to my story, and the final chapter has not been written yet. And so every single day, as we're going to continue to chat about, you have to pick yourself back up, continue to take one more step in front of the other, and face adversity to find the courage within. And ultimately, not only did I get out of depression, but that's what led me to finding Paralympic sport and making Team Canada.
How dark? I mean, how dark were those days for you? You mentioned, feeling this negativity. That's what a lot of people go through, and especially now in these very, very times of not having the control. Some people are going through that kind of thing. How dark were those days for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super comfortable to chat about it because as we discuss mental health, we know that we need to talk about it. And how I view it in my mind is that I view mental health just like a sprained ankle. Is that you had that at one point in your life as a challenge, or you might be challenged with it right now. And once you are healed from it, or as you're healing from it, like, it's just something that's part of you. Like I can speak, like, I broke my back. It's not broken anymore. I had mental health challenges. I don't anymore. I'm currently going through this recovery. One day I will not. But when we talk about how dark it really was, I'm super cool with it. Like, I was suicidal. I gave up or let go of any routine. So I was staying up late. I was drinking often. I isolated myself because through depression, you say things to yourself like, no one wants to hang out with me. I'm going to be a bother. I don't want to talk to anybody. And so after my dad passed away, I just by myself in my apartment very, very often, late at night, 2 a.m. drinking myself to sleep. At the time I was taking Percocet to help with my back. And then that is what kind of really helped trigger me into the suicidal thoughts. I cut those off cold turkey once I realized that it was the addiction, not the pain that I was stuck with. And just to share for context too, like post Olympics, I recovered from that moment after my dad passing away. And then 4-5 years later with post-Olympic depression, I was at the emergency psychiatric ward in Hamilton at St. Joseph's Hospital. But, just to wrap this comment up for a second, is to know that regardless of how dark or deep your situation that you are in right now, know that there is a way out. Because when I was in those situations, I felt like there was no way out. And it just took a couple of moments and a couple of decisions and taking action to really start to turn that around. And I think that's what's so crucial, to know that you may feel like it's over, but it's not over yet.
What was the turning point or the aha moment for you in order for you to realize that? It might be helpful for others.
Yeah, totally. So the two scenarios again. Dad passes away. It's written in my book. This is my book here, still standing. When you have every reason to give up, keep going. So it's my autobiography, chronicles the day my dad fell from a tree until 1 year post-Olympics. So all of the stories are inside here. But the two stories I'll share is, dad passes away, 2 a.m., drinking, heavy metal music. I picked up a knife off the kitchen counter and I thought about it. And I realized when that knife was in my hand, That's the moment that I'm referring to, is that when I thought about I'm this close to doing what my dad did, that I don't want that to be the ending to my story. And the final chapter has not been written yet. So the first moment that I'm speaking of is I had the knife in my hand because I was thinking about it. I never hurt myself, but I was that close. I'm picking up a knife and I'm thinking about it. And I'm like, I don't know if can we swear on here? I don't know what your deal is with that. I'm just like, I'm like, fuck that. I'm like, fuck that. I'm not going out this way. And that was my first moment. The second moment about after the Paralympics, so I described them at St. Joseph's Hospital in Hamilton. And long story short, we're in the waiting room for like 2 hours. We finally get to the emergency psych doctor. As I walk into that second waiting room, there's another young boy who's about 17 years old. He's got fresh razor blade cuts on both of his forearms. He's sitting there with his parents. They go in one room and we go in another with my mom and my grandma. And a couple minutes in, this kid freaks out and he's like, fuck you. He's like, you told me you weren't going to make me talk about this. And he kicks open the door. He punches the hand sanitizer off of the wall. He's out in the hallway and he's screaming, yelling. He calls security. And I thought, I don't know if we're going to get in a fight ourselves. But that was my second moment, because what I realized in that moment was, one is that I'm not, thankfully, I am not in the same situation that he is as in that far into depression and suicidal thoughts, which is number one. Number two is that I realized I knew what I did to get myself in this position. It was like in a moment, I started retracing my steps of Olympics to I stopped working out, I stopped eating right, I stayed up late, I started drinking more, I had no goals. And it's just like I saw the downward spiral. And so I thought if I could see the downward spiral, I could just reverse and spiral up. And then the third thing I realized in that exact moment was that I need to get better so I can help people like him.
And from that, when you look at the advice that you would have for anybody else, what would be the main thing? And well, actually, before I get to that, did you have any issues, or was there any problems that you encountered trying to come forward and asking people for help at that time?
I didn't. Well, I mean, from my experience, like with mental health, often our biggest obstacle is ourself. You know, people were willing to help. They just didn't know that I was struggling. So here's something as an example. From my experiences, like I knew that I was the problem. When I think back to what my dad went through, he was the one that had the problem. Like he wasn't willing. So I'm going to give it away if I tell the dad story first. So from my dad's experience and from my experience, there's 3 A's to remember, which is admit, ask, and accept. So number one, admit. You need to admit to yourself that you had a problem, because my dad didn't think that he had a problem with either depression or as a gambling addiction. And that's what ultimately led to my mom leaving my dad, because he wasn't willing to admit that he had a problem or that he was struggling. And whenever I had challenges, it's because I was getting in my own way because I wasn't willing to admit to myself. So the first one is admit. The second step is to ask. Is that once you admit to yourself that you have a problem, it immediately starts to become easier for you, because now you have acknowledged it and the pressure is off. But the second piece is to ask. Is that no one knows that you're struggling unless you say something. And so what I learned in the moments where I was challenged is that I had to speak up, because the help was there and they're willing to do anything they can, but no one knows you're struggling unless you say something. And the third piece is to accept the help. So my dad is an example. He's at home, he's in a wheelchair. He had appointments for like a psychologist or psychiatrist he would do over the phone. And the appointments would be there in the schedule, and he would either skip them, postpone them, or cancel them. And the same with my mom providing help and myself and others. Like the help can be there, but unless you accept the help and implement the help, there's not much else that can be done. So anyways, I forget how you phrased the question, but from that, what I think about, is like what were some of the obstacles or my challenges receiving help is number one, is that overall it's us. And the 3 A's to remember is admit, ask, and accept.
And you eventually started moving forward. And I'm curious what role things like sport and sledge hockey in particular played. And in fact, you got back on your motorcycle too. I'm curious what role sport played in terms of helping you with your recovery.
I don't know how I could sum it up into one word, but I don't know how I could describe my recovery or where I'd be without sport in my recovery. When I was injured, you hear the cliche about you fall down, you get back up on the horse. It's as real as it gets, especially with extreme sports athletes. Here's another story to recall. I'm paralyzed on the ground. My buddy Chris, we film all our stuff because we film our riding to make a video. So he caught the crash on camera. I'm on the ground. He turns the camera off, runs over, and he reaches down. He's like, "Remps, I love you, man." And I grabbed his hand, and in the air, I looked at Chris, and the first words out of my mouth were, "Chris, you better be filming this." And because when I think about us as athletes, it's ingrained in our body and our brain and our blood that when we fall down, we pick ourselves back up. And so all I could think about was getting back on the bike. The idea of continuing to involve sport in my life was paramount for my own mental well-being. And then when I discovered sledge hockey, that's where I made a transition from. I knew that I could continue to play motocross for a while, or to ride motocross for a while, but finding Paralympic sport to be surrounded by other community members, other athletes who are also living with a disability, gave me something else to look forward to be around those types of people, to discuss those challenges, and have set my mind and my sights towards something new, which was making Team Canada and competing in the Paralympic Games.
So obviously the important thing is to have a goal, and you had a new goal going forward, which was to make Team Canada. I'm curious, when you're winning the World Championship and then you're on the podium for the Paralympics, winning the bronze medal in Sochi in 2014, what's going through your mind there, given everything that you've been through to get there?
How do I phrase this properly? When I think about that moment on the ice of Sochi, is that the journey is worth the struggle. When I think about, I vividly remember that moment for the rest of my life. I just received the medal. It gets placed around your neck, and the weight of it. I mean, just for the viewers here, this is the bronze medal from Sochi, and you can see how thick it is. Like it's extremely thick. And so I remember the moment of when this was placed around my neck, and as I'm on the ice, it was one of the first moments I got to actually smell. I remember the smell of the fresh ice. And I remember finally getting the opportunity to make eye contact with fans in the stands. And I remember looking at my mom and my sister and my grandmother on the far side and waving to them. And I just remember thinking to myself, that's the movie moment where your entire life flashes before your eyes in an instant. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, man, this has been one hell of a ride. It has not been easy. And I could never have written this script, but it was completely worth it.
How emotional was it for you?
Oh, it was fun. It was liberating. It wasn't something I needed or that I was looking for, but it was super cool to just think that, like I say, in that moment, I remember thinking, it's a life story that I'm thankful that I got to experience, and I'm very proud to have lived. I knew that when my dad fell from a tree, one of the lessons that I took from my dad is that he was pissed off because he felt like he was robbed from retirement. And what I learned from that is that I didn't want to wait to live my life. And so I think about all of the stuff that happened from the age of 19 when my dad fell from a tree until the age of 34 when I was on that podium, that in the last 15 years, that I didn't wait to live my life, is that I live my life on my terms. And to this day, I know that whenever I do leave this earth, that it'll be worth it.
The name of this program, Kevin, is the Resiliency Project, and all lessons around resiliency and reinvention through stories like yours. I'm wondering what those two words literally mean for you in terms of your story and your journey.
Resiliency Project or which
No, resilience and reinvention.
Oh, cool. Reinvention to me just means opportunity. When I think about all that we're facing today, there's so much opportunity to, like, you can completely create yourself from scratch right now. No matter what's happened in the past, nobody's going to care or let alone remember. And it's an opportunity for you to create the life that you love and that you truly want to live. And when I think about resilience, I think about it's a character trait that is required of all of us. And it's not something that I believe that you're born with. I think it's something that you develop. And by taking action in spite of fear, it's when you practice courage to continually move forward in spite of what has happened previously, in spite of not necessarily knowing the next right step or even what your ideal outcome is, but to have your mind set on something and be willing to fail along the way. And if you can do that consistently, day after day, just take one more step, you will learn through practicing courage, you will develop your resiliency, and that's your opportunity to reinvent yourself.
A friend of mine, Kevin, shared a recent article that they saw where a lot of psychologists and therapists were talking about the rise in anxiety and sleep difficulties that people are having, some mental health challenges, especially given the pandemic and what we're seeing now. What's the biggest piece of advice that you would have for anybody who might be struggling right now?
Focus on habits and win the small battles. So I have a program I've created as well to complement my keynote presentation about the hero mindset. And my workshop I've created is titled actually the Resilience Toolbox. And all of the tools in the Resilience Toolbox are cognitive behavioral therapy techniques that I've experienced and lived myself, getting through the difficult times and excelling in high performance sport. And so we talk about, for example, self-care is one of those pillars, and it's focused around, nutrition, sleep, and exercise. Those are three key areas that we all struggle with: maintaining momentum, doing the right thing. And so I won't get into the whole details of it, but as an example, we're getting off track with our sleep. We're staying up late, we're waking up late, we're on our phone too long, or whatever the case may be. I created a chart to work backwards in half-an-hour increments every single week and develop your morning and your evening routine. And the small battles that you need to win are, for example, what time do you shut off at? What time do you get off your computer at? What time do you go to sleep by actually turning the lights off, like not lying in bed with the lights off and on your phone? Those are the small battles. Each 1 or 2, 3 of those are small battles to help you just get to bed. But then once you've actually gotten to bed, let's say you're waking up in the morning, you have more small battles to win. The alarm goes off. You can pull your covers over your head or you could not. That's one battle. I get into the shower, and when I come out, I have another decision to make. Either I'm going to put on my casual clothes or I'm going to put on my gym clothes. That's another small battle to win. So long story short, a lot of the support that I think each of us need these days is a structure and focusing on habits and winning the small battles. And with that, we can start to focus on small things that make a big difference and create the outcomes that we all need.
There's a great comment coming in just before I'm going to jump in, Teddy, from Jose Lanouette, who says, practicing courage, win the small battles. How do you recommend that people find their small battles?
Well, they're all around us absolutely right now. I would say, here's what I would say is that you need to be honest with yourself. We know most of the answers or most of the challenges, most of what we need to do. And we're always kidding ourselves. We're lying to ourselves. We're pretending that it's not an issue that we fight regularly. It's not an issue that we stay up more than we need to. It's not an issue that I had a drink tonight and last night and I'm going to pick up more today. It's not an issue that, I eat frequently because I'm bored. Like, we know what we're doing. And so if we're just honest with ourselves about, what is a habit? What is something that is recurring and showing up in my life over and over again that needs to change? Be honest with yourself about that, and then recognize where is that small battle that you need to win. Like I say, boredom and drinking, as an example, is a big issue right now. And when you're bored, either midday, mid-afternoon, or in the evening, you could either pick up a bottle or you could make a cup of tea. You could pick up a bottle or you can go for a walk. You can pick up a bottle or you could go for, you could go exercise or call a friend. Like, there's so many other options. And just to be honest with yourself about what is the habit, the problem, what is it I need to change? And when I observe that, what can I focus on to make a big difference?
How big is communication, Kevin? Because I see you're quite involved in social media, helping tell your story. You're not afraid to do that, and in fact, I think it helps you and helps many others in the process. How important is that, the communication side of things?
Communicating publicly, I like to share because I like to share. I never approach it with a cathartic mindset, though it is, but I'd like to share because I just like to help people. I think that here's another something else that comes to mind from over the years, is that we're more alike than we are different. And through sharing, through communicating with others, whether it's publicly or just calling a friend, it helps you understand that you're not alone in your struggles, and it helps break down your walls so that you can actually get outside of yourself and not just reach out, connect with others, but find help that's outside of your own home as well.
In this pandemic we're going through, how do you maintain your mental health? What's the keys for you?
Practicing what I preach, in the sense that, like, these cognitive behavioral therapy techniques that I talk about are very real. Like, I can't take my webcam, but I'd show you, like a vision board is in my bedroom, a quote board lives in my bedroom. I journal with a 5-minute journal every night, focusing on gratitude. I've got another blank journal that just sits there with empty pages to do what I call a brain dump if I need to empty negative thoughts out of my head. I right behind me here, just for the heck of it, because maybe the viewers like it, but like, I bought a rowing machine for inside of my condo, $200 over retail, because I knew when COVID happened that I can't take the risk of not prioritizing my health during this time of crisis. And so how I maintain my mental resilience is, like I say, to focus on winning the small battles. It's like, when I wake up, I know that I don't want to work out, but I have a choice. When I come out of that shower, I'm either putting on my comfortable clothes or my workout clothes. And if I get the workout clothes on, I win the small battle, and then I get my workout in. And even if you can't get the full workout in, at least if you're moving, you're one step ahead than if you were to not have done it at all. So I don't know, end rant, but like I say, it's basic stuff. It doesn't need to be expensive, and you have all the tools and resources you need already inside of minus the rowing machine, but you do body weight exercises. Most of what we need is already inside of our own home.
I think you're giving some great advice there. Set goals, small or otherwise. Start making small progress. Don't be afraid of making a mistake here or there, and just carry on. I think that's great advice. Now, you've talked to me in the past about how mentally strong you found some people with disabilities are, and the way they're viewed, or way you're viewed by others. I wonder if you could tell the viewers about that.
So what comes to mind for me is, speaking from my own personal experience, what I admire about others who have disabilities, what I see in them and what I've experienced in my own life, is that, when we live with a disability, like, we don't have an option to be resilient or not. Like, we just need to be resilient. And it's not that everyone with a disability is resilient as well, because there's some that are not, but because of the disability, what I've found is that it forces you to make a decision in your mind that I need to accept responsibility and accept my reality that this is the way my life is, and I need and I must find a way to adapt. And so when we think about for me, one of the reasons why it's so inspiring to look up to people with disabilities, because they're always willing to find a way to adapt. They're always willing to deal with the accessibility challenges that they face, with the lack of funding that they face, with the discomfort that they live in every single day. But we continue to move forward, because that's just like motocross. When you fall down, you get back up. Like, that's just what we do. And so I think there's so many reasons to look at people with disabilities with inspiration, not because they have a disability and they choose to live life, but because they have a mindset to continually show up every single day in spite of their circumstances. And that's what's inspiring about our community.
When you go and talk, you do a lot of public speaking, as you were saying. You also speak to corporations around the idea of resiliency. You teach them how to team build using sledge hockey. I'm just curious what the response has been like when you go and share your story and share your lessons that you've learned around resiliency. What kind of response do you get from these companies?
Oh, of course they love it. I can't say they don't love it, but what I love so much about what I do is I have the opportunity to use Paralympic sport to bridge the gap. And when we play sledge hockey, when we bring an audience or a corporate group together in Toronto or Etobicoke, just outside of the Leafs practice facility, and we play sledge hockey, what we say is, number one is we want to get you butt down on the ice for a new perspective. And two, we want you to see a new perspective, not just on our sport, but on people with disabilities. And by getting into a sled in uncomfortable, unfamiliar territory, but on a level playing field, that's when you have the opportunity for yourself and especially leaders to step outside of your comfort zone in a brand new environment where everybody's on the same playing field. And that's where you discover the courage that already exists inside of you, because just in sledge hockey, just like in sledge hockey, the play or the game of life, if you don't pick yourself, sometimes if you don't pick yourself back up, others will be there to help you. But if not, play or the game, like life, will continue on without you. And so when you're in those situations, you start to discover and understand how much strength actually exists inside of you. It just took you being put into this situation to understand that you have that.
Teddy, there's a great question, and Kevin, that we just received from Alf Crespo. He wants to know about your relationship with family and friends during your struggles. How much was that challenged, and how did you deal with that?
Super cool question. So when I was injured, I unfortunately lost one of my very best friends. Like, he was like not passed away, just he was never there for me. So that was extremely difficult. But at the same time, I also discovered others who I may have not considered the closest friends become some of my biggest supporters, even arguably not more than my family, but they kind of, like, I got a buddy, Mike, he visited me at the hospital pretty much more than my mom. And so I think, it's sad, but in some ways it's sad but true. But what I experienced, and probably most of us, when something significant happens in our life, is that you start to discover who your real friends are. And it'll bring some closer together, and some of you start to fall apart. So for me, it was not easy losing the relationship with one of my closest friends. But what I discovered is I have other excellent friends with me, and I made some new friends that to this day are the tightest of all.
Kevin, I thank you, Alf, for that question. And Kevin, just following up on some of your advice that you have for others, just based on your experience. I've often found that, for people to be truly happy and joyful in their lives, everybody's kind of looking for meaning and what their purpose is in a lot of ways, how they can make their mark, whether it's their imprint with their family, their community, or with the larger world around them. I wonder how that manifests itself for you in your life.
How did I find meaning and purpose?
Or what is the meaning and purpose that you found throughout your journey to date?
I'm trying to think of the right way to articulate this. You know, selfishly, I remember, how did I read this before? You know, when we begin on a journey, it's very normal that we begin selfishly. Like, I began selfishly that I wanted to be the rock star. I wanted to be on the world stage. I wanted to be doing stunts. I wanted everybody to like me, etc. And that failed. And then I ended up starting a new journey where it did work out. And then that ended. And then I started another new journey. Like, so motocross, dream, crash. Team Canada, cut from the team. Rebuild life, now what? And when I think about sorry, I actually lost the question for like 2 seconds. Can you repeat the question again?
The question is what you have found in terms of your purpose in life, and what gives you the most joy.
Right. So the whole selfish thing. So I began selfishly, but each time, especially Team Canada and especially today, is that, you know, I began the journey trying to serve myself. And now I understand the meaning and purpose is to help serve others. That we will go through challenges. We will experience life in ways that we feel like it's not fair, that it shouldn't happen to us, and that we may not understand why we're in this place at this present moment. However, we don't know what that other side looks like. I had no idea for 2 years that Paralympic sport existed after my injury, until finally one day someone said, "Have you tried sledge hockey?" So sledge hockey brought me on this incredible course. It helped bring me to the stage, public speaking, to share my story. And the meaning and purpose comes from you taking, this is Jack Canfield, but turning your mess into your message and using your life experiences to help others along the way is how I find where you get your juice, where you get your energy. What lifts you up is when you take what's happened to you and use that to help serve others.
So when I'm just thinking, what makes you jump out of bed in the morning is now completely different from when you were a kid, and now it's about trying to serve basically your community and help others deal with maybe what you've learned along the way.
Yeah, the whole mess into a message thing, especially, like, you know, what juices me to get up out of bed in the morning is that I've had a pretty fucked up life in some ways, but I fucking built a life around that. Like, I built my entire life that I live today completely around all of this shit that happened. I'm sorry I'm swearing a lot right now, but it's like that's what's exciting to me. I get juiced that from all that's happened, my life is great today because of that. And because of all of that's happened, and because of the life that I've built, I get to use all of that, not only to live a good life, but to help other people along the way. And that's fulfillment. That's happiness. That's not feeling like a victim to your circumstances. That's the whole lemons to lemonade story that we all want to live. And we all have a choice to accept the reality that we're in, to accept the current situation, and to continually move forward, recognizing that we're just all in different stages of the path, but we all have an opportunity to become a hero in our own movie.
When you talk about becoming a hero in your own movie, a lot of times the hero is somebody that, you know, has to overcome hurdles, has to overcome all these barriers in order to get to where they are in the end, which hopefully is in a great place like you are now. But the hero also learns a lot about themselves in the process, lessons that they had no idea when they started down this path. What would be some of those biggest lessons for you that you've learned about yourself?
That's a long list. One is that I still struggle with this. I'm going to be super honest with you.
Yeah.
Is that I always got to put my ego in check. You know, I like accepting responsibility. I like having all the pressure on me, but at the same time, I have been smacked in the face too many times, metaphorically, to realize that I don't have it all figured out, that I can't do it all on my own, and that I need to ask for help. And similar to mental health, my success in entrepreneurship has often been crippled by me getting in my own way. And that if I were to be willing to slow down a little bit and be a little bit more patient with the process. So what's the word? How was I saying? Patient with the process and persistent with the outcome. Or patient with the outcome, persistent with the process, patient with the outcome. I kind of screwed up that punchline a little bit, but those are some of the big takeaways. I can't do it all on my own. Need to ask for help. Persistent with the action, patient with the outcome.
You obviously have many more chapters to write in your story, in your book. What's your ultimate goals at this stage?
I mean, in no particular order. Top of the list is I'm at a point where I'd like to, have a family, raise a family. So that's not like a goal, but that's something that would mean a lot to me. Financial success, I never dreamt of making $1 million. It never mattered to me, but I met a guy named Dan Martell and he asked me the question about how much money do we want to make? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't care. And he's like, well, you should care. I was like, why? And he said, you want to start thinking about generational wealth. And I had no idea what that was. And long story short, earning enough that not only can you provide a good life for yourself and for your family, but you can support others around you and your community and give back and have enough to even pass down beyond that to your family. That's generational wealth. And when I think about impact on others, we've raised $32,000 in the last couple of years to buy sleds for kids with disabilities, and like hockey sleds and the gear. And my dream on that side is like, I'd love to be able to say like, annually I can help raise $100,000 every year to give back to sledge hockey or people with disabilities, and continue to buy sleds for kids and help get a team started in Toronto, because we've got a lot of sledge hockey teams around the GTA, but nothing like downtown. And our sport and our community needs that. So I'd like to be able to help grow the sport here and be an influence for others around the country and raise some money.
Just as a final question, as we wrap up here, Kevin, what's your hopes in terms of the Paralympics? Being a Paralympian, we saw some of the footage before from Sochi. From my recollection, as somebody who's covered the Paralympics since the Games in Barcelona in 1992, we've seen it covered in ways that we never saw back then, and way more broadcast coverage. We actually saw live coverage of that game from Russia, which was unprecedented. What's your hopes going forward in terms of people and the way the public sort of views the Paralympics going forward?
Top of mind with the sledge hockey experience that I run, the idea is that we help the able-bodied population become fans or advocates for people with disability through their experience. And I believe there's going to be a tipping point, the same way that our world has completely gone through a tipping point of one way to another, that I've always felt like for years that the Paralympics will experience something very similar, where we've been kind of like a shadow to the Olympics, and one day we will just be as prominent as they are. So my hopes is that we hit a tipping point like that. And as you described, the coverage has continued to increase. I think that, especially now with the times that we're living in, there's more content continually popping up on social media. I think in the world of influencers, there's a big opportunity for many athletes that are in the Paralympics to become those influencers for their niche, for their world, for their story. So I hope that some athletes choose to step up and do that, because the opportunity is real. And I just, the sport always needs to elevate as well. We've had Canada, USA dominate for several years. South Korea, Czech Republic gets up there. Russia keeps getting banned, but it was great when we had more competition. That it'd be great to see in the sport of sledge hockey in particular. We have a Paralympic Games where all 8 teams are competitive enough for those top 2 or 3 spots. But we just always need to elevate the sport, and that's going to happen with time.
I really agree with you, Kevin. I think there's tons of room for growth with the Paralympics. The competition has been improving almost every year in almost all the events, and I think we are going to reach that tipping point. I'd like to see it sooner rather than later, but I think we're going to get to that point where we start seeing more and more coverage, as we move forward. And people are looking for awesome feats in sport, and you have no place better to look than the Paralympic Games, I believe.
100%. Our world is shifting more digital. When we have live Facebook coverage, I believe that those opportunities will continue to present themselves where brands want to align themselves with someone who's got a presence and with more accessibility to watch the games, the competitions live. It's going to be shared more. It's going to continue to grow more, and that tipping point is going to come.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time today to share your story, to share the lessons that you learned, to talk so openly about mental health. It's incredible to hear your journey to date, and I'm looking forward to reading the next chapter, Kevin.
Cool. Thank you so much, Teddy. Thanks, PJ.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to PJ, my partner in crime. Thanks to Kevin Rempel for joining us today here on the Resiliency Project. Kevin, as you heard, is a world champion and Paralympic bronze medalist in sledge hockey. Look up Kevin's website, kevinrempel.com, for more information, or if you'd like to contact Kevin directly. And if you happen to be struggling yourself right now and need somebody to talk to, you can call the suicide prevention and support number here in Canada. That number is 1-833-456-4566, and people are available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Hope you'll join us for our next edition of the Resiliency Project, coming to you on June the 5th. That's 2 weeks from today. We'll bring you more stories from around the world about resilience and reinvention to help you deal with some of the challenging times we're facing with COVID-19. And before I let you go, please take the time to like our Think Redefined Facebook page to help us spread the word about the Resiliency Project. Thanks once again to Kevin Rempel and to my partner in crime, PJ Kwong. Bye for now.